Thank you so much for coming to check out another episode of the Stash Cast, where we have interesting conversations with interesting people focused around the world of commercial real estate and prop tech. The Stash Cast is brought to you by Needle. What if you could use data and analytics to predict real estate transactions? You can with Needle. Come check it out at Needle, NEDL.us to learn more. All right. Today, I'm super excited for this. We have the one, the only, the famous Mike Lipsey, president of the Lipsey Company, here today. And Mike, thank you. Thank you so much for joining and appreciate you being here.
First, I'm honored and thrilled that you invited me. And as I had just mentioned to you, I spend most of my time doing the interviews. So it really is always a nice experience to be able to sit back just a little bit, respond. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So, honestly, in my world, you're a celebrity as far as I'm concerned. I've known about you and your prominence in coaching and consulting and the brand survey that you do. And so I know who you are, but for those who maybe have been living under a rock, why don't you give the people a little overview of who you are and what you do?
I, I'm going to go back a few years. I started my career in Louisiana, in New Orleans, built a good sized commercial real estate firm that did brokerage and property management. We did a lot of consulting, particularly as it related to apartment conversion to condominiums. We had a wonderful practice from Houston, Texas to almost Pensacola. And I was approached by CB in 1980. Would we be interested in selling our firm to them? And of course, I was still probably in my late 20s at that time, and I had no interest. And they didn't want to start a firm because in New Orleans was considered a provincial marketplace. Long story short, I ended up selling Michael Lipsey and Associates to CB. It was a wonderful experience. I stayed with them from 81 to 84. And matter of fact, the term that they had, what now is called market leader, was called resident manager. And resident manager was the guy that was responsible for running the day to day for that particular office. So I leave in 84 because I had a 3-year earnout. And I really did a lot of soul searching, and I didn't want to be a broker again. I wasn't involved in equity, but I just loved the training and I loved the teaching. And matter of fact, it must have been 1981 that I applied. At the same time I sold my firm to CB, I applied to be a CCIM instructor. And I was doing maybe a course almost every month. So I was doing maybe 8, 10, 11 CCIM programs a year. And so I said, Joseph Campbell has said in the past, follow your bliss. And I just really thoroughly enjoyed the training. So I created a little firm that was going to specialize in training and consulting in the mid 80s. I had 3 young sons at the time. And so Lottie and I decided to move from New Orleans to Central Florida, which we did in the late 80s, to build the Lipsey Company. And we were fortunate that the guy that I worked closely with in New Orleans was the president of Urban Land. And he told leadership over there, if we're going to develop a 4-day leasing course, I have a good guy, Mike Lipsey. And so I helped develop this 4-day leasing program for ULI. And coincidentally, I had done a number of CCIM courses with a dear friend, Ralph Spencer. And I said, Ralph, I need someone to help me develop this program. And Ralph worked closely with me in developing this 4-day program. The leading developers were members of Urban Land and still are. And they would come up to me and say, we'd like a leasing program, but could you come do it in Dallas? James Campbell Estate said, could you come do it in Honolulu? And I'm thinking, I think there's a real need for on site training. Not everyone wants to get expensive airplane tickets and 3 days of hotels, and they could reinvest the travel money and do more training if you did it on site. And so that's how our on site training business really developed since the 80s, was just going on site, and we would work with REITs, and we do a lot of work with Fortune 500, GlaxoSmithKline and AT&T and T and Medtronic, where they want training on facilities, and then maybe work with their real estate executives. So I'm giving you more than you want. So our
No, this is
business started
exactly what
off
I want.
as just doing stuff for Bowman, Urban Land, and NAOP, but then developers and corporate real estate executives would come up and say, this would be cool if you could do this in house. And so the bulk of our work today is working with the large national accounts and regional firms and wonderful boutiques, going on site, This year, I'm not going to travel 200 days a year. I typically do 200. This year, I'll probably do about 175, 180. And that's our business now. You give us a call and you have a sales meeting or you have an on-site training. Are you doing a retreat? Are you doing something special for the year end? And we come show up and do whatever you want us to do.
That's awesome. I think there's a couple of things rolling through my head. I think I knew that you were a CCIM instructor, and it's probably partially that, among other things, that was influential on me to get my CCIM. What courses were you teaching when you were doing that?
The courses are, we had a course which was 100 and 104. I don't know what the hell they call them now because I've been a CCIM going on maybe close to 50 years. And 100 was the course that we developed with Ralph Spencer, Jerry Anderson, Lee Arnold, Vic Line. And as I look back over my 50 plus years, we developed 100 and 106 with that group. It was maybe one of the most enjoyable experiences of my career. They were great friends and wonderful fellow instructors. And 100 was a course about how you build your database and how you market yourself. It was a wonderful course. And of course, CCIM decided we need to discontinue this course. It's not fancy enough, I guess. I'm saying that. I know I'm exaggerating. There's not enough IR discussion. There was no IR discussion. It
Right.
was, how do you target market who you're going to call on, and what's the best way to get to the decision maker? We don't want to teach CCIMs that stuff. So when they discontinued the course, I also had a conflict of interest with CCIM in '89 where I was now starting to really ramp up my practice. And they had this agreement, this conflict of interest thing in your contract that you couldn't be teaching outside of CCIM. That business was really starting to prosper. And so they gave me an ultimatum: stop teaching CCIM or give up this outside business. Is that I'm not going to give up the outside business. And so they essentially said, you're on probation for a year, is what actually happened, I think, in '89. And I just said, which was really a windfall because now instead of having to do 6 days of CCIM, I was able to do six individual in-house programs, and the economics weren't even close. And
Right.
so sometimes when the front door closes, the back door opens, and it really helped me grow our practice. But what was interesting, at about the same time, they discontinued the CI 100 and the 104 course. And the 104 course was the negotiating course.
Yeah,
Well,
they
we don't
lumped
want to
that
teach.
into a half day now.
Yeah, we don't want a week long on negotiating. They don't need to know how to negotiate. And those are now our courses and have been for decades. The
Yeah.
ones that they got rid of at the same time they got rid of me were the one. So it's just crazy how things work out.
Yeah, definitely worked out in your favor. I'm surprised. So, funny story, Mike came up and did some consulting for us and our team a few years ago. And the one of the things that I remember, the training was there, or the consulting training was great that you did with us that day, but you pulled out a brand new fresh Brooks Brothers sweater vest. Had never been worn. You put it on. I just think of you in that sweater vest often, Mike.
I travel with two or three always in the package, black and blue.
Yeah.
And I had trouble finding them. I find most of them, though, believe it or not, at the Brooks Brothers at O'Hara in the terminal. Why they have them, I don't know. But anyway, I always have two or three in my suitcase. And sometimes these meeting rooms get a little cold, even in the summer, and I put on my sweater vest and I feel like I'm like Mr. Rogers. I'm ready to go.
That's awesome. So I'm curious, like you've seen the industry change from fax machines were cutting edge technology to now we've got CRMs and ChatGPT. What has been your experience over, and I guess how have you and your practice adapted over that time frame?
It's interesting. So it must have been 20 plus years ago, maybe 25 years ago, we wrote a book called Digitizing Real Estate. And maybe it was way ahead of its time, but we were convinced that real estate was going to become much more digital. But to answer your question, we have a wonderful course, which is the practical applications of AI for commercial real estate. We launched it about 9, 10 months ago. I did a program for SIOR in Chicago at their annual event in October, which was the practical applications of AI. And of course, we had wonderful feedback. They loved it. So now it's an in-house on-site training program. but I'm not comfortable teaching it. Now, Tim Rios, our chief learning officer, is really gifted. So we go on site, but before we get on site, we say, Stash, tell me what you would like AI to do for you. All right. And you'll say, you know what? If I get two proposals from two different tenor reps for the same space, can AI help me evaluate the two proposals? Another one is if I sign a 40-page lease, is there some easy way that lease can be abstract and also organize critical dates? Another one is can it help me develop a proposal or a presentation for a listing? Can it help me develop a list of creative features and benefits for a space that I'm trying to lease this afternoon? Can it help me identify a tenant for a building that I'm trying to sell? These are the things we get, and it does every one of them. It does every one of them. And we go on site and we do it, and even the most reluctant broker, when they see us abstract a lease in 2 minutes, and it asks, why is there not a personal guarantee on this document? Because it was missed by the broker. When it takes two proposals for the same space, we did this for a dear friend of mine in Atlanta, Ryan Sawyer, a few weeks ago, and it takes them. And then if you say, using the discount rate of 8, could you give us the present value of both proposals? And it does that for you in 60 seconds.
Wow.
And again, I don't do it because Tim and really our younger trainers get it. And I get it. And I'm enthusiastic about it. But I prefer now to do the much softer stuff, closing, getting to the decision maker, presentations, how to do a tour. Just I'm more comfortable in the soft skills and the more technical skills, whether it's using Argus or one of our CRM programs. It's just you got to do it a lot to really feel comfortable with it.
Hmm.
And so that's why I spend most of the soft time. And then we're fortunate the younger instructors and trainers pick up the other more technical stuff that they do a much better job than I ever would.
That's good. It sounds like you're following a similar thought process as myself, is do what you're best at and let the technical stuff be to those who are best at that.
But before you get to your next question, when we get calls, even from the most senior brokers, we have to present to them our AI course. But they're calling me about, Mike, help me ramp up my business development and help me make a better presentation. These are the most senior brokers. So what's interesting, salespeople want to be better at sales, even if you've been doing it for 25, 30 years. And so I'm fortunate because that's what I really enjoy delivering. It's you would think there wouldn't be much demand for those practical programs, but we see it.
Those skills that, like when you came and spent some time with us, we spent a lot of time on the concept of the black swan and finding that outlier. And but things like that are not, like you said it, CCIM cut out the sales presentation or how to build your database. And those are fundamental things, especially for I was maybe I was a few years in at that time, and we've applied a lot of the things that we went over that day into our practice since. But I think what you're spending your time on are things that AI probably won't be able to fully replace because it's still a person to person business.
Oh, well, let's just talk about that for a second. So I get an email from a dear friend out of Atlanta asking about, will AI replace the coaches and the trainers? And I went back and I said, I get asked this all the time, Mike, of all the skills that I need, what's the most important skill that I need to be a successful broker? I said, your social skills. I said, I can't teach how to be fun to hang out with. I can teach other things. That needs to come first because if you think about the best brokers, they have empathy, they're good communicators, they have a wonderful sense of humor, they have fabulous social skills. And that is the one thing that is almost just it's an innate ability that most brokers have. So that's why I'm thinking I've never met any AI solution that has a sense of humor. Now there's some that have made me smile because what it'll do for you, but none of them have made me laugh. And
Right.
so that's the difference. I want to mention something though.
Yeah.
When we got together in 2010, I think it was around 2010, because the recovery was just getting cooking coming out of '08. The reason we introduced the concept of Black Swan was price discovery was so hard to come by. And I said, you're losing your listings because you keep opening your mouth talking about your broker opinion of value. And once you say BOV, you're screwed. You're in the box. You're not coming out the box. Now your BOV gets compared to two other BOVs. And if yours happens to be lower, the seller says you don't believe in the property and they give the listing to somebody else. The purpose of the listing presentation is to win the listing. It's not to be able to be intellectually accurate on your BOV. We don't know what it's going to sell for. Particularly now that we're anticipating a reduction in interest rates, pricing is going to start changing again. Win the listing, create what feels like an auction. And then if you do that, then you'll get the best possible price, but you won the listing. But if you come in there and spend 30 minutes trying to defend your BOV, which you can't defend anyway, because the seller will never be happy with your explanation, share with them, we're not going to even mention BOV. What we're going to do is help you establish your reserve price, the minimum that you should sell the property for, and then we're going to use our best practices to find that buyer who's willing to pay the most for the property. That's how you win the listing. But when we were together back, and I think it was around 2010, it was just starting to get organized in my head to help capital markets brokers win more listings by avoiding an in-depth discussion about the BOV and spend more time talking about the process that they use to find the one buyer who'll pay dearly for the property.
Yeah, and it helped us win a couple of listings, so it's been helpful. So you have probably spent more time around brokers than almost anybody else. And this is a question I ask to many others who I've had, but what are the characteristics of good brokers and what are things to avoid or bad brokers?
First, work ethic. You're not willing to show up at 7:15, 7:30 and put in your 12 hours. I don't know a lot of guys and gals doing 9 to 4. And when I still had my practice before I sold it to CB, I used to interview young brokers. I said, I want you to understand, I'm here at 7, and I'm expecting you to be here when I'm here. And I typically don't leave till 6:45 or 7. So I'm 7 to 7, 12 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and I'm always available on the weekend. So let's just start there. And so if I get a commitment that you're willing to outwork your competition, so far so good. And now I want you to be a student all the time. I want you to be in love with this business. I want you to be thinking about it all the time. I want you to know about REITs, and I want you to know about capital markets, and I want you to know about sales, and I want you to know about negotiation. I want you to be a student all the time. We used to have our youngins do book reports once a month. I'd give them a book, they'd have to read it, and then they'd have to come back to the sales meeting and do a book report. And so learning was just always part. And then if you can combine that with the passion for the business, the work ethic, and you've got really a cool personality, you're going to be great. I've told brokers this for years. I'm always amazed at how much y'all make with so little skill. And the reason is because sometimes the technical skill isn't that important. You'll get yourself a team member who can do Argus, or you'll get a team member who can run a Syndix or Salesforce, right? But you've got what can't be trained, which is sales skills, work ethic, passion. You follow what I'm saying? Those kinds of things. And all these years later, that really hasn't changed that much. I still see these successful brokers like yourself, and you bring those ingredients to this business, and you're all in. Great brokers are all in. They're not halfway in. They're not playing with the business. They're not thinking about, let me make, they're never thinking about another career. This is it. This is
Yeah.
it until they're not doing it any longer.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to be all in. And one of the things that I don't know if you told me or if I heard from in my early training, you have to develop an encyclopedic knowledge of the market that you're in. And you can do that either by living in it or driving to it and maybe officing in it. But I can tell you transaction histories of deals I wasn't even involved in, but I know who bought it and who sold it and approximately when. May not know the cap rate or anything like that, but I can tell you trade histories on most of the deals in my market.
It's interesting you say that. It's, you are so right on. When I'm in markets, and I'm in different markets all the time. Matter of fact, I did Fort Myers, Florida. I'm going to Houston, Texas for 2 days. And whenever I'm with the broker, I'm always asking, what's that per square foot? And how long did it take to build? And what's the zoning on that? Of course, there's no zoning in Houston. But I'm asking all the time those kinds of questions because you just have this natural interest in learning as much as you possibly can and storing it because you're going to always go back into that memory and pull it out and use it when it's required. So you're exactly right. Have as much possible information that you can about the market on all the details.
Yeah, for sure. Fascinating. I wish I could just apprentice, especially if I could have in my early career, just apprenticed behind you and just learned everything. I wish I could just have you as my sales manager, but it doesn't always work
But
out, does it?
what's interesting though is I'm really a generalist in what I do because on a Monday, we could be working with 7-Eleven with their corporate real estate executives on how they can be more effective executives, real estate executives for 7-Eleven. And then on Tuesday, we could go work with a retail REIT. And then Wednesday, we could work with a regional brokerage firm. And then Thursday, we would work with a national brokerage firm. So we have this wonderful knowledge, but like for a multifamily broker, your knowledge goes way deep.
An
Ours
inch
is kind
wide
of,
and a mile deep.
yeah. So I'm good in a lot of topics, a lot of stuff. And for someone that says I wanted to be a generalist, but as a trainer, you've got to have a lot of knowledge about a lot of things because if not, you'll become so tight in your vertical in just one area, you wouldn't be doing reach, you wouldn't be doing corporate real estate executive.
Yeah. I'm sure though that there's crossover between disciplines in the soft skills, like you mentioned earlier.
Well, there is, especially in the presentation, the business development, the negotiating. You're exactly right. The soft skills. But here's what I find though. If I'm working with a group of multifamily brokers, I better not say the word lease. All right. Now you think well, they don't want to talk leasing.
Right.
If I'm working with mortgage bankers, now they're the worst. If I'm working with mortgage bankers and I talk brokerage, they look at me like, what? No, Mike, you just offended us, man. I can't believe you said that. We're not brokers. We're mortgage bankers. And so you would think all these different groups, but what I'm saying is very similar from group to group, but you got to make sure what you're hanging on, the examples in the case studies, are mortgage bankers examples, are retail capital markets examples, are landlord rep industrial examples. Because if I use a multifamily example to an industrial broker, they're not happy with me, even though the soft skill that I'm delivering is almost identical.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, how did you come up with the brand survey? Switching gears a little bit. And as a follow up to that, I'm sure you've seen brands rise and fall. And what are the attributes of long lasting brands?
So it's interesting. There's two questions there.
Yeah.
The first question, when we started the brand survey almost 25 years ago, I was just curious which companies had the most recognizable name. It was just curiosity. And when we sent out that first survey, I think which was done by fax, I had to beg people to respond to the ballot. Beg them, beg, please. We get sometimes, this is not an exaggeration, the number of ballots that we got back in the first year, we get that many sometimes in 10 minutes at our website. It's just crazy. It's tens of thousands of ballots are being submitted. But early on, people used to say, Lipsey survey isn't that important. I never forget, and I won't mention his name, loan consultant, but Lipsey's brand survey is not that important. And the reason why is the folks at Insignia were upset that they didn't rank as high as they could. All right. The next year they're gone. They're acquired by CB. You with me?
Hmm.
Staubach. Why are we doing a little bit better? 2 years later, they're going to JLL. Yeah, you got it. It's just a coincidence that's happening. But that was, to me, is what was always interesting is brands disappear. If you look at my survey from 20, 25 years ago, it's amazing the number of firms, Grubb and Ellis, which by the
Um,
way, is a brand you couldn't kill. Newmark didn't call me and say, Mike, should we keep that name? No one ever called me, but it was a brand that didn't die. It took 4 years after they were long gone for them not to still rank in the top 10. So let's take a brand that's got pretty good brand and just get rid of it altogether and replace it with a name that's maybe not as well known. Now, I know I'm sure when the Newmark people listen to this, they'll be pissed off at me, but it is what it is. And but do get a lot of calls, especially from those that are in the top 10. What can we do to do better next year? Are we limited to the number of people that can cast ballots? I said you can only cast a ballot one time. So there's a lot of interest in the survey, particularly among firms that want to move into the top 25, want to move up to the top 25. And then I get a lot of interest if there is a regional firm that has no flag that is thinking about, Mike, we want to hire you to counsel us on which flag we should take. Because there's 4 or 5 different firms that are not in this market that would like to be in this market, but we don't want to pick the wrong one. And so we'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each one of the separate brands or separate flags. So for us, it has been a wonderful way to extend our consulting practice, but much of it we never charge for because people call up and say, Mike, how are we number 9? It's impossible. Do you see the volume? I said, it's not a discussion about volume. It's a discussion about name recognition. And here's something else that's interesting. 25 years ago, you saw release signs everywhere, right? You don't see as many now, do you?
No.
And that's where brand used to really come from. Those firms that had the most listing would really do well in our survey. But so much of what we do today is digital. You're not seeing it as you drive around. And so that's really had an interesting effect on how we've reorganized the brand survey. Because if you were the leading listing broker in your market, you would brand very well, at least regionally. So it really is fun to keep up with. It's a hell of a lot of work, but it's rewarding when the results finally come in.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at it right now. It's amazing 'cause some of these groups on here wouldn't have even tracked even 10 years ago when I got started in 2008. And so some of them wouldn't have even been on there. Um, so it's interesting.
Well,
So
what's really interesting is some are always in the same spot year over year. They're consistent. And then we have some that are doing this. They're up one year, they're down one year, and they need to be tuned into why are we so inconsistent and moving 3 or 4 spots up or down. And so that's one of the things that we have a discussion if they ever call us.
So is that a characteristic, have you noticed, of are those brokerage firms? Or I see you have some ownership groups on here. Why such volatility?
Let's take the REITs, for example. When the REITs are gangbusters and like the Prologis, Vornado, where they're in the news all the time, and they're banging big deals and they're doing big development, you're gonna see them really move up in the survey. When REITs fall out of favor, which they have the last 24 months, they're coming back. But when they fell out of favor because of the movement in interest rates, all of a sudden they pulled back. They're not doing much development. They're not making a lot of acquisitions. They're just out of favor. So they move. Brokerage firms, for the most part, stay pretty close, maybe a couple spots one way or the other. Now, we do see some that make some nice moves because of an acquisition. If they make an acquisition, because this is what we do. When CB years ago acquired Insignia, the votes that Insignia got that year, but now they're part of CB, we count as CB votes. So that sometimes mathematically really changes the position. Now, CB is always number one, but so take, for example, when JLL acquired HFF,
Right.
the HFF votes became a JLL vote. And that's one reason that you might see a movement of 3 or 4 because you're now getting twice as many votes that you got the year before.
Hmm. Why do you think CB is always number one?
They have the largest number of employees, they have the largest number of brokers globally, and they do an incredible job. The guy that heads up marketing that has been in that position for years, he is keenly aware of when the survey begins, or are people responding, and they take their survey very serious.
Mhm.
And so they just they remind them when the ballot comes in, we want you to fill it out and submit it. Now, we do not count a ballot if you vote for yourself 5 times. That gets thrown out. You got to have 5 legitimate votes. All right. And you can't vote twice because we save your email address. And if you come back in a second time with your email address, we just don't count it. You might think it's being counted, but it's not. So they just are serious. So when you're the largest and you get your employees to participate, you tend to have pretty good results.
Have you ever done anything on in the sub verticals? Because each product type almost has its own leaders. Is that just too much?
What's interesting, years ago, you would never have seen SIR or CoStar in our top 25.
Right.
Even though they might have had enough votes to be there, we kept it to just, you had to be either a broker, investor, or lender, not a service provider. But they kept doing so well in the survey, we just said, you know what? If in the mind of the practitioner, or should be in the top 25, then I'll put it in the top 25. We started doing that about 3 or 4 years ago. CoStar made the top 25 probably 8, 9, 10 years ago because they always did so well in the balloting. We several years ago we attempted to do one just for technology related companies to commercial real estate, Argus, Syndix, that kind of stuff, and we had limited response. We're going to start it again in 2025 because now I think in 2025 is a much different place than 10 years ago when we experimented with it. So we're going to do 2 surveys. We're going to do our brand survey, which always starts in January. And then about 6 months later, we're going to do one for service providers, specifically technology related service providers to commercial real estate.
Hmm. Huh, that's interesting. Yeah, the landscape of commercial real estate technology has changed drastically over the past 10 years. I plugged Needle at the top, and I don't think we've talked about it, but why do you think commercial real estate has been so slow to adopt and adapt to new technology as compared to other industries?
What do you think is the percentage of commercial brokers that diligently use a CRM? Diligently now.
I'd say it's
Attach, go ahead.
I'd say it's pretty low.
Yeah.
5, 10%.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
2024. One of the most important tools you can use to dramatically improve your productivity. And we've had 10% using it.
Yeah.
So I've only been trying to transition folks from Excel and constant contact and whatever the hell they're using to whichever one they want. I don't care if you use Salesforce, Ascendix, so I don't care. Real Next, I don't care. Just use one of them, but really use it. Now, many of them have a team member that's using it and pretty good, but the broker themselves. So when you ask the question, why have they been slow? Most, the majority of very successful commercial brokers have a DNA, which is about engaging people and being involved with the deal. And only a handful of them are really diligent when it comes to integrating a CRM in their practice. Now, they might be good about having a team member integrated farm, but it's just not in their best interest. And here's what's really interesting. When ACT was a popular program because it was so easy to use, brokers really were using it. And I can't tell you how often I have brokers say, Mike, I wish I could go back to ACT because it was out of the box, an easy program that you could customize and use. And they got frequent upgrades. Give a broker Salesforce, it blows their mind. It's too much.
It is too
It's
much.
and when you and so if you put a Syndix and Apto on top of it, does that make it easier to use? I don't think so. It's still on top of Salesforce. So that's what we need to be able to do is make sure that we're giving brokers programs that are relatively. It's not because they're not smart. It's because they don't have the time to really get up to speed on it. That is relatively easy to use and has immediate application. When we're training on a software program and the vendor is going to do the training, I tell the trainer, I said, I want to have a clear understanding with you. There's 10 things I want them to be able to know about this program. If you talk about number 11, I'm going to ask you to leave the front of the room. So let's say it's a CRM. how to do a lookup, how to create a contact, how to attach a document, those 10. That's it. We do not need to hear about all the things the program would do, because if we do, we're going to lose everybody. I'm going to have you come back in 90 days and we'll do 10 more, but they're going to perfect these 10 first. And then we'll do 11 through 20. And then in 12 months, they will learn 40 capabilities of your program. And then they'll be using it. But that's the mistake that these IT people make. They create a program that they're the only one that understands how it works. And then they try to train the broker on the wonder of the program. And after about 15 minutes, most brokers that are ADD to begin with, they're not even listening to what's going on. Now, maybe if you've got a good team member, they're attentive, so they're getting it. They'll be able to use it when they get back, and they'll be able to tell their senior, here's how I can use it for you to make you more productive. And that's what ends up happening.
Yeah.
So they've got to be programs that are practical, that are easy to use. I have, in all my years, and I'm in a lot of offices every day, I don't see many brokers using Argus. Now, I do see a 23-year-old that's using it, but I don't see many six-figure, low seven-figure brokers all excited about going in today doing a model in Argus, right? It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. That's why I hire an analyst. Yeah, you make a good point. The best CRM. So the thing with CRMs is if you use it regularly and consistently, it's like a garden. The more you work inside of it, the better it gets. We have been on Salesforce for a bit, and I made a good faith effort to get into it, understand it. I did a bunch of their training, and sometimes maybe it's whatever licensing you have. Maybe you don't have the capabilities to do the things that it's walking you through to do. And it's why block? Just let me go do it. Let me see what I can figure out. Has been my take on CRM because it can be an amazingly powerful tool if you can use it. But if you can't use it, what's the point? It's just
It is an amazing tool. And so what we've tried to train our brokers, to me, if you've got a team, one of the most important team members you can have is an individual that will help you build, maintain, and leverage your CRM, do your social media, maintain your team website, those kinds of functions. It's the electronic person, but the CRM is a huge part of that suite of capabilities. I want someone, because we've always tried to get teams to have a team website because you can do so much more with a team website, which is linked and conforms to what your company is doing. You can't be off doing something completely unrelated. So it's got to conform, do so much more with it, but it's got to be maintained on a daily basis, if not a weekly basis. And then we want someone that's really good about social media, because most brokers want to use social media but aren't using it. And then we want to make sure that you really got someone that's like the lead on your CRM, that's building the database, adding net new names, using it electronically. And then if you've got that staff person, then we find that the available technologies get integrated into what the senior is doing more frequently, even though this broker is not adding names and they're not going on to Hootsuite to do an upload. They've got somebody that really is very skilled at doing it, just like you would if you had an analyst or a good marketing person. That is an important person that should be on your team.
yeah. So in past couple of years, and especially over the past months, 2 years maybe, been in times that we haven't seen since the 2008 great financial crisis. And you're seeing a lot of movement in teams and companies and things like that. I'm curious what advice you have for those who are out there evaluating their position. And I was talking to somebody yesterday and they're like, yeah, you're seeing brokers just getting out and finding a new career or having a side gig or aligning with new firms. What's your take on that?
I've got a couple of responses. One, I love college football, and it's hard to believe that some teams are actually starting their practices next week. So we're close. And you can always tell, because if you go like to ESPN 12, like it's not ESPN 1 or 2, but like deep into ESPN,
Yeah.
they're running college games from last year. They always start up in July and August to get you salivating. To me, our business is like the playing field on any given Saturday. There's some Saturdays that fall has set into the Midwest and It's going to be 68 degrees and clear skies, and you can have almost any game plan you want. There's no water. No one's going to be slipping and sliding. It's going to be fantastic. And then you can have a game that's going to be in the South in September and it's going to do nothing but rain the whole time. You got to have another game plan. What we do, we take the field each day and we've got to adapt our game plan to the field that we've got because everybody's got the same field to play on. If I was a broker here in Orlando, I don't get some hall pass. I don't get some kind of exception. Everybody that's a broker in this marketplace has got to deal with whatever's happening in Orlando. That is our playing field for today or for the week or for the month. And that's first me philosophically. Recognize the state of the marketplace and what do you have to do to re-gear your practice to be successful. And if you think that what you did 3 years ago when interest rates were 3% is going to work today, maybe you don't even belong in this business. I mean, if you're thinking you want to be able to back out of your driveway and have a good year when you get to the office, then you're not committed to the business. You are committed to the business as a good coach would be. We've got to adjust our game plan based upon who we're competing against and based upon the playing field we're going to be on. And that changes every Saturday to a good college team, right? And so to a good broker, they're recognizing what is the evolution of my practice and my team to take advantage. Perfect example. When the business moves away from us, the traditional training business, and the nationals are 80% of our business when interest rates are 3, 4, 5% on the last cycle. But when they start shutting down their training, we've got to pivot. So now we pivot to the institutions because they're concerned about occupancy levels. So what are the tools that we can do to their property managers and their in-house leasing people to lease more space in a little more challenging market? Then we start working with more regional firms, more boutiques, and we do a lot of team consulting because some teams have done quite well, like the industrial teams and even some of the capital market teams. They want to even do a bit better. But we have to recognize for me to call on our major accounts that are really very good to us in the great years, they have no budget. I'll have a nice conversation with them, but they're not going to give us any training. So who can we call on that does need us? So that's how we pivot in our business. Brokers need to be doing the same thing. They need to be thinking about, and this is a poor example. Can I come up with more creative ways to get a deal financed through seller financing or some kind of bridge financing? Or how can I structure the deals differently to maybe get a little bit more for the seller than they normally would if we just got a 70% loan to value? So that's philosophically how we train everyone. Recognize that playing field tomorrow is going to be different than the playing field. And what's interesting, the playing field changes abruptly.
Yeah.
There's no one sending you an email a year in advance, even though they do. Capital markets brokers didn't recognize that interest rates were going to move against them months before it did. Now, you guys knew. The senior experienced brokers knew, oh, it's coming. We don't know when it's coming, but it's coming. But those that are act surprised, really. So first they're surprised, which they should have been. Then second, they should have been willing to adapt to whatever they've got to take advantage of it. Realistically, revenue might be off a little bit, but that doesn't mean you go to zero. It means what do I do to maybe do 70% of what we did in a great year? But hang in there because I'm committed to the business. And the good news is 24 months later, it tends to come back, comes back in a different way, but momentum still comes back, and then we take advantage of it. So I don't know if I answered the question, but it's really just a philosophy that I have. Do what you have to do until there's a return with this greater velocity, and then we're feeling pretty good again for another 5 or 6 years. But you got to have an interruption every 5 or 6, 7 years. And this one actually went longer than anyone ever thought it was going to be anyway.
Very long. Yeah.
We went from 10 to 22. That's 12 years. That's crazy.
I remember talking to guys in 2014 saying, I'm just going to wait until things start to reset. They're still waiting. And I feel they missed a great run up. We're seeing a lot of trouble in the office market that's resetting. And then, so I want to get your thoughts on the effect of work from home and COVID and the remnants of that. And then I also want to hear maybe your take on upcoming perceived interest rate cuts, and then maybe also conversion of office buildings. Those are three kind of topics that are forefront in my
L-
mind.
Like a lot of people, I missed the adverse effects to office. I thought it was going to be retail. We had a retail account come to us, a large account in late 2020. And they said, Mike, we're so concerned about what's going to happen to retail. Design a training program for us so that we can pivot. Retail's done great. Today's centers are less mom and pops and more restaurant entertainment things that sort. But they've done a really nice job. And the reason is obvious. Retail has the best real estate with the best visibility, with the most parking, with the greatest access, and it's one story. Office building has pretty good access, pretty good parking, depending on where it is, but it's vertical. And so you can't do a lot of retail on the fourth floor. So I missed it. I thought it was going to be retail was adversely affected, but it ended up being office, which was a huge surprise. We were back to work in June, May or June of 2020 in this office right here.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine everybody working from home. Now, our clients in California, I didn't go to California for a year. Texas, we were back there the next week. Texas didn't miss a beat. COVID, what the hell is that? Get your ass over here to Houston, right? Los Angeles, oh no,
Don't
you can't
stay
come to
away. Yeah.
you can't come to California. I said that's fine. I'll go to Austin, Texas. We pivoted a lot to our webinar solutions for those that didn't want us physically. And then the others, there were a lot that we just continue to go to like we didn't miss a beat. Office. I don't know. And I don't think many people do know what's going to happen. Now, even though we hear folks all the time, we want them back Tuesday through Thursday, but do you need as much space? And so office is really a huge question mark. We see buildings in Houston, Texas now selling for the land value. And the reason, and I say the land value, and here's the logic. I buy an office building and the user now wants $100 a square foot in TI, $80 a square foot in TI, $75 a square foot in TI. So if I do a 10,000 square foot lease, that's $750,000 requiring that the next tenant 7 years doesn't want, that's got to be ripped out. That's the real problem with office is the tremendous amount of capital to keep it leased. And that's why so many folks are walking away from their buildings are saying, I know what we paid for it, but it's what we've got to continue to put in there to do new deals. We can't justify it because we don't. Well, how can I justify doing $75 a square foot in tenant improvements plus pay all the commissions for a tenant that very well could move out in 7 years? So that's the real challenge. Is years ago, we worked closely with Steelcase that had a wonderful solution called Workstage. I loved it. They would come in, they'd raise the floors, everything was underfloor ducting, the electrical and the HVAC. You could go in to someone on Friday and say, we want to reconfigure the seventh floor. And on Monday it was done
Wow.
with Workstage. It was all completely a steel case solution. It was fantastic. So you didn't need to do all that TI. Now the initial investment was hefty, but then you didn't have to keep ripping stuff out and putting stuff back in. Until we see that take hold and find a way to reduce it, they've got two problems. One problem is people don't want to go back to office because they don't want to commute. And then the second problem is the constant reinvestment of TI in the space. So it's not just people wanting to go back to the office. That's part of it. I'm not so sure that the heavy TI requirement isn't a bigger problem than getting people back to the office. Now, people think that they've cracked the code because now they've got on-site daycare and they've got workout facilities and they got food service and they got shared conference facilities. So that's all cool stuff, but we haven't seen the migration like we want. So I don't know. I don't know who does know, but I do know that there's two things we have to tackle. Finding a way to attract them back to the office, which may be a little unemployment, might be the key. Let's get up to 5.5%. That might be the trigger that we need. And then second, at the same time, though, we need to figure out how can we reduce this crazy TI that's required on an ongoing basis. Because if we don't, then buildings become just a capital hole. It's just throwing money in it year after year. and hard to sell them. So I don't have an answer for office, but I think I've identified the issue.
Well, and
What was yeah, go ahead.
they become zombies too. Like if you can't do the releasing or won't, I saw a headline of there was a you probably saw it too. It's a building in St. Louis that sold it had previously sold for I don't know 350 million and it just traded at like 60 million. And it was like, oh my gosh, wow. But it's I've been in a number of office conversions to multifamily, and some of them you can pull them off, but you can't do them all. They're not all convertible to apartments like some people think. You've got floor plate sizes that are too wide or too deep, or deck clear heights that won't facilitate installation of new HVAC, for instance. Like,
They they have this company out of Annapolis. I think it's called Street Sense. I'm gonna yell to Jennifer and just what's it called, Jennifer? Yeah, Street. It's called Street Sense. Initially, they would go to broken down malls and understand the marketplace on what should be done with this incredible 100 acres or 50 acres or whatever it was. We need multifamily. We need to reduce the amount of retail. We need to put in a hotel. And when you get a chance, go to Street Sense. I'm not so sure that Street Sense doesn't have an answer because they've come up with this fabulous answer for large retail that's over retailed because they have identified the gap in the marketplace that is the better alternative use. We did a survey with Simon, and they took a property they have in Buckhead in Atlanta and did a masterful job taking a mall and reducing the size of the mall, putting in all other uses. And now it's a wonderful success. So that's what has got to happen. How do I look at this office? And Street Sense said something that just was brilliant. They said it's not a leasing problem, it's a real estate problem. And the explanation is you keep wanting to do what it's not meant to do any longer. Look at the real estate and figure out what now is the use of that real estate that there is demand for. And that's where we need to look at these office buildings today. There's not enough users to go by for that Class B. Class A, there probably is, but not for the Class B. So let me look at it as a real estate problem, not an office leasing problem, and just decide what is an alternative use, whether it's a school, whether it's a church, whether it's an apartment complex, whether it's assisted living, whether it's storage. There is another use for that great location. That's how brokers need to start looking at it. It's a real estate problem. You got to stop looking at it. And those who have really diversified their database for other users outside of office are the ones that I think are starting to make an effort in helping the landlords because they're saying, it's not going to. I had someone hire me the other day for South Florida for an office building. I said, I know that building in that location. That you're not going to lease that, but I think it would make a wonderful school. It's got crazy parking. It's got amenities close by, and I don't know about University of Phoenix, whoever. And as soon as you said school, they said that could be perfect.
yeah.
And so that's how we need to look at those office buildings today. What is the challenge to make it something else?
Hmm. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. So the last topic was thoughts on where the market's headed with the speculation that we're going to get at least one, if not multiple interest rate cuts here in the next couple of months.
As I tell people that'll ask, I'm not macro. I'm a plumber. I'm an electrician, and I work tactically. So, yeah, there's an interest rate cut coming in September, maybe another one before the end of the year. I do know this. It's going to create a lot of enthusiasm and optimism. On the way in today, I was listening to Squawk Box, and they're all jacked up on REITs. Well, REITs were not in favor for the last 2 years, and all of a sudden, REITs are. And then I see the largest IPO of the year is that refrigerated REIT that went out 4.5 billion today called Lineage. It's crazy. They've got 500 refrigerated buildings around the country. So commercial real estate's coming back. Okay. So it's the largest IPO. It's not some software company. It's a refrigerated warehouse company. Can you imagine? Is that wonderful? And now REITs are banging again. Here we go. I think the fourth quarter is going to be awesome for us, especially as we go into 2025. We see 3 or 4 total interest rates over the next 6 to 9 months. There's going to be a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm. but that's coming from a plumber. That's not coming from an economist, because I get people call me and say, "Can you come and do a high level presentation?" I said, "There's nothing high level about what I am a grunt. I work with the brokers. I work with the property managers. I work with the mortgage bankers. If you want high level, that's not me. But if you want to know how can I lease this empty building, I think we can make a contribution." So I'm optimistic it's going to create lots of enthusiasm. But beyond that, I got to show up tomorrow and do something and take advantage of whatever the market gives me.
Yep. So the last thing, I'll endorse what you do and shamelessly plug what I'm working on. So
Yeah.
Needle it was an idea. It started off as an idea of because I kept missing deals. And I would have the conversation with an owner. "Oh, no, we're not doing anything." And then you see either a listing pop up with a competitor or an off-market deal come through. And I just talked to that guy. What am I missing? And in doing my underwriting with my team, we would see the trends and data occurring. And they'd be preparing it for sale, clearly, because you see a difference in the T12, 6 and 3, the income increases. Maybe they put some capital in, things like that. So you see the spend, you see the increase in revenue. And man, what if you could use data and analytics to predict real estate transactions? So that's the platform that we've built. We're coming out to market, soft launch in August, and then full market in September. Focus just on multifamily right now. But and we're pretty good at our predictions, but even with that, you still have to sweet talk the princess, so to speak. You still have to know how to get in front of the decision maker and convey a message that is compelling enough to get them to want to take your phone call and engage in a transaction with you. And I think that's where you come in with the soft skills that you mentioned earlier. I think what you're up to and what you're doing is invaluable.
Appreciate it. Listen, I've long admired your success. You're well known beyond your podcast, and you have been as one of the premier brokers. So I was thrilled to be able to accept your invitation and spend this hour with you.
Yeah, this has been awesome, Mike. I really appreciate it. I'll tag you on social media, but if somebody's just listening to it, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Our website is Lipseyco, Lipseyco.com. And my cell number's on there. I'm easy to reach.
Yeah.
I have a philosophy: top of mind, easy to find. And that has been our thought philosophically for years. I want you to think about me all the time. And then when you need to talk to me, I'm also easy to find, whether it's LinkedIn or whether it's email, whether it's my cell phone, whether it's our website. We try to make ourselves available.
Yeah. Mike, you're the man. I really appreciate your time, and
Oh, Stash, appreciate it.
I hope you have a great rest of your day, my friend.
You too. Thank you.
All right, bye now.